Yes.
Good evening and welcome to everyone. This is a special workshop at Oshkosh City Council. We have city planning staff here to present their proposal for draft ordinance proposal for a rental inspection and certification for the city of Oshkosh. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Davis, Community Development Director. So, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mayor Cummings. Tonight we're going to talk about a draft that we have about a rental registration and inspection program. I have with me Chief Building Official John Zarate. He's going to lead off by showing you some of the things that our inspections have identified in the past. And I don't know if we can dim the light so people can see that a little better. And then when Mr. Zarate's done, Mr. Burrich will be able to explain some of the community-wide housing and demographic information that we have on housing in the city, and then I'll go through the PowerPoint slides that you should have received in your packet to talk about more of the details of the program that's being proposed and some of the things that you guys can consider before advancing this further in the community. So I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Zarate. Yes.
All right, thank you all for listening to us. I get the exciting part, I guess, to show you all these great pictures that we get to take on our job. So as long as I can get this thing to...
Have technical difficulties, Scott. Oh, there it moved when you touched it. Okay.
Maybe Darren should have been doing this.
Yes. What do we see there?
This is very hard to see here. What you're looking at here are some, there's some steps, and boy, this is a terrible lighting on here, but what it is they've got these steps in the back here that are supported by a bunch of blocks. Where do you got that? On the bottom? So in the back here, so this is one of those kind of elevated stairs with these big long things that are coming down. It's just supported by blocks. I mean, it's in no way, if this would have been a clearer picture,
How were you notified of this?
I believe this was a fire department violation. They had seen this on one of their calls. Okay. And then this is very typical, probably in almost every rental inspection that we do. We're showing here a smoke detector that has a battery out. Of course, it's not working. So that's what we're showing there. This is a plumbing violation, a leaking pipe. I will let you judge for yourself what the stains are on the outside of that plumbing pipe. It's in the basement, fortunately, in this case. But again, these are things that, like in this case here, my guess is probably the tenant wasn't even aware of this. They probably called us in possibly for some other violation, and then we had seen this. And then here we have the picture on the left will show a repair that a landlord has taken, or a maintenance person from a landlord, to repair the plumbing pipe. That yellow stuff is, if you've ever heard of Great Stuff, the foam, that's what they tried to use to patch that in. That is not an approved patch for plumbing pipe. Over on the right, you'll see what looks like a downspout going into a black pipe there. That is actually a rain downspout. That is going into the sanitary storm sewer, which you don't want. You don't want all the rainwater in the city to be going to the treatment plant to be treated. So that was a huge violation that needed to be disconnected, along with the other pipe off on the right coming into that black pipe. That was just kind of shoved into the side of that black pipe, illegally done. So just some examples of different stuff that we have. Here on the left, again, more plumbing with some fix was to put the bucket underneath the sink to catch the dripping water instead of actually fix the pipe. There's an illegal connection thing right here. It's kind of like a corrugated, stretchy type plastic thing they use illegally, and that's in there. This one over here is very interesting on the right. Every once in a while when these people were on the toilet, they noticed that their back would get wet and something was splashing out of this wall. So right here you'll see the zoomed in picture. This is an open plumbing pipe from the unit above. So you can do the math on what was probably splashing on them when they were sitting on their own toilet. And then here we've got some venting issues. On the left, that is a water heater vent, and right here you'll see that is open. So instead of the exhaust going out the chimney, much of it is escaping right into the basement of this house, and then you have your carbon monoxide getting into the house that way. And here you'll see a bunch of, I guess just to make it easy, we'll call it some sort of condensation type issues that go on with water heater ventings. When it's too big or doesn't have the right pitch on a pipe, it won't properly vent, and so this sort of like makes all this condensation type deposits here. There's no way this water heater is venting anymore, and so all those gases are going right into the house. And then here, I think this was actually another photo by the fire department that they had taken. Someone was using propane heat because they didn't have any heat in their house, so they were using a propane heater here with that little thing on the top to give themselves some heat, and that you definitely cannot do. And now we're into some electrical wiring. You got an open electrical switch here, and then this cord is kind of like a cord and plug, so that's not approved for permanent wiring. And then this, of course, just being all left open like that in a wall is not approved. Here you'll see some more open wiring in a wall next to a fixture that is probably actually hooked up correctly, but this open wiring is not approved. Doesn't show up in the picture, but I'll draw you a line from the garage here. It kind of loops down, and then it kind of comes back up. That was the power to the garage, and it was probably about 3 to 4 feet off of the ground. And that was the power to the garage. So that wire needs to be like 8 feet above the ground, and 3 feet was not cutting it. This is living conditions. In our draft ordinance, I believe one of the things that we look for would be unsanitary living conditions. This isn't anything, of course, that the landlord, is responsible for. This is something the tenant is responsible for, but we find out about these through various ways. Perhaps the landlord has someone go in for maintenance. They see the tenant living like this. The fire department maybe gets a call for some sort of emergency service there, police department, social services with the county, and then we get called about conditions like this. And this is all the same unit. So you've got their kitchen over here, and then their living room over in this area. Darren's touch again. There it goes. And this is just a real easy building one here. Here is the normal step height, and then you can see this is about double out of there. It's just that this is sunk into the ground, and it's out of the rear door. So just an easy violation, but something that's common. Yeah, no handrails. And this is other stuff that we got called out for. So if you were looking up at the ceiling here, in this one, this is all open wood and rafters from water damage that they had coming in, and actually some of this wood was actually starting to rot in here. So we were called in because every time it rained, or I can't remember if this was snow or rain, it was leaking, obviously. So that's the reason why. And then here, they did have a leak, and then they fixed the problem. Some of these ceiling tiles were falling out, so then the landlord fixed the problem with these U-Haul boxes here on the ceiling. And
Duct tape?
And yeah, it looks like some duct tape. Duct tape would have been good, just not the U-Haul boxes. No, neither would be good. And then here was a sink that was falling off of the wall, and so you'll see the new board that they've tried to stick on there, but then the repairs to the wall were never made, and that needs... You're lucky this doesn't focus that well, but this is bed bugs. We do have these cases. It seems like popping up more and more in the city. So here you see their lovely pet cat on the mattress with all these little spots. Some of the spots are blood, some of the spots are bed bugs. All of those little dots over here are bed bugs. And literally these things jump on inspectors. They have to wear DEET and stuff as they go through, and we also have like kind of plastic baggy type boots that kind of come up to the knees that we wear to go into these places. And then here we're going through some of the things that we'll see. This is rental as well as owner occupied that this could happen. So then we've got furniture stored outside, and that is not allowed by municipal code.
Is that chair supposed to be steps?
Yeah, right, because there isn't any steps there. Maybe that's what it is. And then here we just have more junk and debris. One reason why I've got this picture in right here is this is the garage, and there's a chimney coming out of the garage, and that chimney is for a solid burning appliance. So they're using wood in the garage, and that is not allowed by the Wisconsin Building Code or the city code. The reason why you don't want to have these types of things, because they present problems. This is someone's grill, and right here it's not showing up real well, but you can kind of see the darkness. The siding's melted on the house because the grill's being used right up next to the side of the house. And we go back to the picture of the couch sitting next to the house. This photo was taken from where there used to be a couch, and someone deposited some smoking material onto that couch that was sitting outside, and this is the result of that. And this is really nice. So you have a sump pump in your basement that typically gets rid of the groundwater and pumps it out onto your lawn or pumps it out to the city storm sewer. In this case, they had their sanitary sewer running into their sump pit in their basement, and so their sanitary stuff, which is all your toilet waste and any other types of waste that goes down your drain and your sinks, that was all being pumped out, into their rear yard. So right next to where the kids are playing in the swing set, and there's just a close-up of that. And then here's some obvious parking violations, one in the front yard and then the boat. You know, they did a pretty good job of trying to keep that off into the side yard, but the car is a really good example. It's unlicensed, there's no plates on it. And then just a few pictures of examples of what we'll see when we're talking about our violations of exterior junk and debris, and these are typical, especially this. I mean, this is real typical, just the one bag or whatever we got, maybe 2 bags. You know, this is pretty excessive here, but not uncommon. And that's my show.
Thank you. And basically, all these codes were created to protect people's health and safety, and I think Mr. Zarate selected some of the photos we have from rental properties that threaten people's health and safety throughout the community, and I think I want to make sure that the council and anybody who is listening, this is health and safety concerns that we have. They're all minimum codes. We're not inventing any codes. Everybody's supposed to comply with this at this point in time. Health and safety is the #1 priority. That's why these codes were invented in the first place. Then I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Burrich, and we might need the lights back on briefly, just so we can talk about some of the planning maps he has here.
Yeah, I don't have a show like John just did, but I have a couple maps that kind of illustrate the issue that we're dealing with in the city of Oshkosh. This is the rental concentration map of rental units. So if you see the red on here, that just shows you where the rental units are in the city of Oshkosh, and you can start to see that. You see the natural concentration around the university, but that center city, you do see a lot of units in the center city, and that's a lot of singles and twos. A lot of single-family units are in rental. Then you start to see the larger development on the west side with the Midwest development. So that just kind of shows what we're dealing with. They're all over the city, but you concentrate your rental stock in the center city, and then we start to look at where your housing stock is concentrated. It also coincides with where your oldest housing is in the community. So this map shows the median year that a structure was built in the community. Again, the core of the community, that's where you have your oldest housing. Pre-1950, you're going to see a lot of pre-1920 in there. So you start to see, now you start to have a concentration of rental housing stock in the oldest part of the community. So you have all those houses that were built prior to the UDC codes being adopted. Then we have
They were probably built as single-family housing, converted to,
A lot of them were converted to twos, a lot of converted to threes, things like that. There's a map of you. There's a map of your median housing values. Again, as you get in the center of the city, you have the lowest value of housing in the community. As it goes out, it gets larger again. So you've got the concentration of your rental stock in the center city, where you have the oldest housing, and you have the lowest, and you have some of the lowest values. Then we go over to this map, which we start to see a little bit of some different relationships. Here's a map that breaks down each of the census tract by percent of renters in the community by census tract. So again, you're getting in here 88%, 65%, 33, 47. So you see this concentration in this form. Then on top of that, what we have is the median rental values of rent in each of these districts. So you get into the center city again. Now you start to see something else is happening. You're getting higher rental prices in the center city, where you have a large share of low to moderate income housing, low values, things like that. I will add that the median value of the rental for the city of Oshkosh is $553. That's median, not average. That's median. And this would be simply, we're talking about responding to code enforcement complaints, all our code, grass, weed, junk, debris. Then you start to see, again, there's a concentration in the center city, where we have the most amount of rental housing. So that's all I have right now. I don't have tables or anything, but I travel with maps. That's what I do. So.
Thank you. So just to follow up on that, I have a PowerPoint presentation that you should have copies of in front of you, and I thought I'd review that with you. I don't need to read every word, but I thought there'd be some things that I'd want to touch on, and feel free to ask any questions as we go through. The rental housing concerns in Oshkosh, we estimate there's over 12,000, could be 13,000 rental units in the city, and as Darren pointed out, they're concentrated around the university and central city, but they are located throughout the community. A lot of people think that the city automatically does inspections. We don't automatically do inspections. It's mostly complaint-based. We do some proactive along our gateways, but by and large, they're going to be complaint-based right now, and not all of them. We haven't been in all of them, and a lot of people think we have actually done inspections, when in fact we have not done inspections of rental properties. And stressing again, the health and safety is the driving force behind this program. Some of the other points that Darren's made about older conversions in the central city, the Oshkosh Fire Department actually inspects only the common areas of rental buildings with 3 units or more. They will respond to complaints as well. That's why we get some of the calls as well. But they only look at the common areas, say the hallways and the stairwells of buildings that have 3 or more units. So the 1s and 2s in the central city and the university area, they wouldn't necessarily be looking at. High volume and for calls, and a lot of violations when we actually do get called. And then people have asked about what kind of history do we have, and we started.
Could the gentleman, so we can hear this, could we take any questions outside so we can hear the presentation? Thank you.
So with the new software that we installed, we started tracking rental units, code enforcement in the last 2.5 years. You can see we've had almost 2,000 violations recorded at this point in time. Many of them are property maintenance codes. That's a common thing, but building code, junk and debris, we're talking almost 2,000 violations, and I'm sure we're over 2,000 since the time we actually ran that report, just on residential rental units in the city.
Alan, when you say property maintenance codes, is that actually maintenance of the property, like physical property, or is that like cutting grass and that type of thing?
It includes all the property maintenance codes, so it does include grass. It would include not shoveling, that's a public works thing. It would include the peeling paint, things that they aren't maintaining on the exterior of the house. And right now, we probably spend the equivalent of one full-time equivalent inspector following up on these residential rental unit cases. And then we have the source of those complaints. John touched on that a little bit. Typically, it's neighbors' phone call or office visit, city website, which is available 24/7, tenants, and as John's mentioned, other public agencies and city departments can also do that. And the city inspector on the city gateway corridors, we will do proactive inspections of the exteriors. We follow the normal correction process. I only included that because we don't go through that very often with the group. We verify the violation within 48 hours, 99% of the time. We contact the owner. 85% of the time, we get the violation corrected within 30 days. In some cases, they get a second violation. In some cases, there's a citation, and a small share actually end up on Winnebago County Circuit Court to be adjudicated by a judge.
Do we know how many are on that list that have been adjudicated by circuit court?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure we could come up with that number to follow up on that. Impact on neighbors and neighborhoods. This relates specifically to the city's strategic plan. If you recall, it's a high priority in preserving and protecting neighborhoods. We're working on neighborhood associations. They identify property maintenance and appearance as a concern of theirs. They're not specifically saying that a rental unit program is required, but rental units are part of the problem in these neighborhoods, and they can lead to lower property values. Declining property values hurt the homeowner's home equity. And we're talking about many other things that we're doing to try to strengthen neighborhoods, and we talked about a lot of those earlier tonight with Healthy Neighborhoods Incorporated. The other things that we're doing with capital improvement programs, architectural standards. You've authorized the TIF districts to extend for an extra year, so we have funding for home improvements for rentals and owner-occupied. I'm sorry. We're collaborating with all our partners. We are acquiring and demolishing more blighted houses and buildings in and around neighborhoods than we ever have, and we're continuing with the beautification programs in the neighborhoods. And when we first started talking about this, we wanted to see what other communities were doing to address their rental unit concerns. Some of the communities that were identified related to the UW system, Whitewater, Platteville, Menominee, Stevens Point, La Crosse, Madison, they have a program where they do a registry and inspection program. There's other communities that do that, from a few hundred to thousands of people. Oshkosh would be very similar to the Whitewater to Stevens Point, La Crosse, Menominee, Platteville type of program, and Eau Claire is working on a program, is what they tell us at this point in time. So we were looking at a good model for that. While we were looking at the good model, the state legislature was considering what's allowed for a community, what they permit a community to do when it comes to a rental registry and inspection program. Those amendments were adopted earlier this spring, and we had to kind of digest what those amendments were. I believe the mayor was down there several times to talk about the potential changes. The city may require a citywide contact listing and registration. The city may implement a citywide program of regularly scheduled inspections. The city may charge fees for inspections that the city cannot require the landlord to arrange for the inspections. That's basically how I interpret the state law that was adopted earlier this spring.
What do you mean by we cannot require the landlord to arrange for the inspections? I mean, if we want to inspect something,
we need to contact the tenant.
okay,
The law, as I understand it, says we cannot require the landlord to set that inspection up. We'd have to work with the tenant directly.
The operative word there is really require. We cannot require that. That
Correct.
mean that voluntary cooperation couldn't happen, but we cannot mandate it.
so, but if the tenant wants, is maybe the question, if the tenant requests an inspection, the landlord cannot block that.
No, in fact, we respond to many tenant complaints.
I just wanted to get some clarification on. Thank you.
Right now, we basically have a voluntary program in the city. It's self-inspections. The residential rental units can call at anybody, building inspection at any time. There would be a cost for that inspection. Right now, if the tenant calls, we don't charge for that inspection, but if the owner would, we can, it's in our fee schedule to do those inspections for anywhere from 100 to 400 units, depending, $400, depending on what is being inspected. It's not 100% participation because we get hundreds of complaints throughout the year, and it does take a certified inspector with the training and expertise to really interpret the codes in every application that we see out in the field. The need for the rental contact listing, that's the registration piece. Ownership of rental units vary greatly. There's local versus non-local ownership. A lot of it is becoming non-local. There's been foreclosures and bankruptcies. Phone numbers aren't always recorded when it comes to who owns a property. We have a mailing address. It could be California. It could be anywhere in the country. Management responsibility is oftentimes unknown. LLCs frequently own these properties, and that makes it difficult to find the contact information, especially emergency contacts for police and fire or any code enforcement. It's difficult to track them down in many cases. So that's, the law requires a contact, name, address, phone number for something like that, or an agent if they would choose. That's what we can ask of the landlords at this point in time. What we'll be looking at in the rental inspection program are the existing city codes, property maintenance, plumbing, electrical, everything that I think Mr. Zarate identified on his pictures we see in the field on a daily basis, and those are the codes we'd be looking for. We think there are advantages both to the tenants and the landlords. We think that the one advantage for the landlord to have the contact listing is that city personnel can send the owner an email each time city staff has contact with their tenants and property. If they live across the country, they certainly don't hear every contact that we have, and many landlords would like to hear that, and we give them a vehicle to make that happen. Tenants can be held responsible for certain violations. Code enforcement staff certainly has identified tenants that are problems, and landlords can help solve the problems, and some of these examples are the cars parked on lawns, the inoperable vehicles, and the junk and debris. It's the tenant who creates those problems. Right now, the landlord gets charged when we have to correct something on that property. But if I think we could arrange for a program to make the tenant or the vehicle owner responsible with a citation if we would choose to follow through with this program with the landlord's cooperation. Third-party verification that they have met the health and safety codes that we have in the city. That always helps when it comes to any concerns that would come up with the tenant or any kind of legalities in the future. They'd at least be able to point to the inspection that the city did in the past.
On that, so if there's a verification or some kind of certificate that they passed the inspection, that's only a point in time, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so
we'd be able to say this is what we found on that inspection
Right, okay.
at that day or that
Right.
dates.
not
Yes.
that we're guaranteeing that
No,
beyond that date.
No, we cannot do
Right.
that.
Okay.
There are landlords that need education, want education on health and safety requirements, and we think we can help educate tenants on their responsibilities when we get out in the field doing these inspections as well. We're also considering, or the council could create a rental housing advisory board. I think that body could be very helpful in creating training and education programs, brochures, checklists, websites, social media opportunities. We haven't even scratched the surface since this is a new program, but I think based on what I've heard from other communities, this is an opportunity that we'd have here in the city of Oshkosh as well. The council has identified funding for these types of projects. The new program that we can highlight in the targeted neighborhoods is a program that would be a 0% interest, no requirement for any kind of down payment. It just needs to be affordable housing for the tenant, which is basically 30% of the tenant's income. Quarterly payments and for interior and exterior repairs. That doesn't exist today, but the council can create that as part of this package. And I would encourage the council to strongly consider that. We also have a community-wide program, and I'm not... I might need Darren's magic touch again. It's kind of stalled. Oh, look at that. He touches it and it moves. Thank you.
Touch.
And we already have a program that's citywide, but that one has a few more strings since that is part of our block grant funds where it's a 10 to 15-year affordability period. There would be a lump sum payment upon the expiration of the affordability, and that does require a 50% owner funding match. But if you recall, that's a new program, and we're going to have more neighborhood associations, so this one's probably going to be more attractive. And as time goes by, more and more neighborhoods will take advantage of this to help correct some of the code violations and improve the appearance and the curb appeal in those neighborhoods. So that one...
Where would the funding come from?
From the city council, when they extend the TIF districts for an extra year, we've segregated that into a Healthy Neighborhoods initiative, and this is one of the elements of the Healthy Neighborhoods program. Oh. Certainly, there's advantages for the tenant. The health and safety inspections will be performed on a regular basis. Code violations are re-inspected until corrected, and we'll have an opportunity to educate the tenants on their responsibilities and duties to be a good tenant and a good resident in the neighborhood. What we're thinking with the rental contact listing and registration, we would make this web-based, available 24/7, easy updates throughout the year. That's the voluntary sign-up for the email contacts for owners. They could include that as a voluntary measure for contacts with city staff, and there would be no fee, and this would cover the entire parcel regardless of the number of units contained. What we're thinking right now with the residential rental inspection, it needs to be citywide, and right now we're proposing once every 5 years. You recall we have 12 or 13,000 rental units. That would be about 2,200 units per year that we think we can handle, and over a 5-year period we could cover the entire city. The re-inspections would continue until the violation would be corrected, and then they'd be back to a 5-year cycle. As indicated earlier, the city would contact the tenants. Landlord would be invited if they'd want to attend. If the landlord could arrange to inspect all the units in a multi-unit building, we could reduce that inspection fee because we'd have an economy of scale of covering, say, 4, 6, 8 units all at once, rather than an individual trip for each tenant, and that would reduce their costs. Typically, code violations must be corrected within 7 to 30 days, but there are some cases where they'd have to hire contractors to make any modifications to bring it into code compliance, and then staff could grant an extension for that violation.
And on that inspection, I know you talked earlier about the training. Is there any discussion of having like a fire department personnel go along with the inspector, or maybe somebody from the health department go along, almost like an inspection team, so that if you had, health and safety issues, the health department could be part of that. If it was a fire code, the fire department would be part of that.
Absolutely, and right now with the 3 or more units, we would intend to coordinate with the fire department for their common area inspections as well as the unit inspections. Right. And we already informally involve the health department or other departments as needed when it comes to some of the health-related issues that we get in those properties. So yes, we would continue with that and probably formalize that, because right now it's basically on an informal basis. It's mostly complaint-driven, so it's ad hoc as we go along what we find out.
Chief Franz, your fire department guys, each station, they're all trained the same, so you don't have, when you code violations that you guys see, it could be any of your engine crews there going out, right? You don't have a specific code enforcement fire department person, do you?
Correct. We have two people that are assigned specifically for some of the inspections, new construction, follow-up, problem issues, but the majority of them are done by the people out on the fire companies. So, and we're in the neighborhood of about 5,000 inspections annually that we do, because we do all commercial buildings and then 3-family dwellings on up.
And then kind of to add on to what Councilor Herman was talking about, the team, I think a few years ago, we did look at the correlation between police calls and those code violations. And they seem to be, like, if you were to do an overlay, I don't know what it's like now, but a few years back, if you were to do an overlay of those code violations and the police calls, they were very, very similar in nature. And I just want to throw out there, too, that, you know, part of this Middle Village, we did walks with the police officers from our Team 1 on a monthly basis, and so they were also helpful in kind of liaising with inspections as we did the neighborhood walk and identified other issues related to law enforcement. These other things would come up, and then they could kind of work with
I
us.
imagine we could put a team officer, let's say doing a certain part of the city or whatever inspection. I'm sure that area officer could accompany the fire department, the health department, your inspector also.
Absolutely.
So if there was any law enforcement issues, they could be addressed right then and there too, so.
And it's pretty accepted, the broken windows,
Oh, yeah.
that, you know.
Sure.
that-
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Okay. So we're looking at residential rental inspections of owner occupied if the owner lives in one unit, and we'd still have to inspect the rental units and anything that's not owner occupied. So if there's a duplex, we'd inspect the rental unit that's in the duplex. We're talking about somebody who has a roomer and they occupy the house, but it's not a separate dwelling unit, that would not be inspected. It's only if they actually rent an entire dwelling unit to another party. That
So
that
we
would
wouldn't
be
do
inspected.
housing rooming inspections, is that what you're
Well,
saying?
we already do boarding houses, but that's a separate category. If it's a single-family home and a person's living there and they rent out a room, that would not be inspected. It's when you rent or lease out the entire unit.
Now, if it was, excuse me,
Unless you would receive a complaint from the person renting out the room.
Oh, that's
then-
true, yes. We will always continue to investigate complaints.
But how does that work with the college rentals then? Because they're renting out by bedroom.
You are correct. If anybody complains, we will be there to investigate the complaint. With this program, we would coordinate it with the tenants so that we would do an inspection in accordance with state law when it comes to the inspection of that dwelling unit's rental. So they might rent it by room, say 2-bedroom. Those 2 bedrooms are rented out individually, but they still rent the entire dwelling unit.
Okay.
The owner's not there in that dwelling unit.
Okay,
Then it's
I gotcha.
inspected.
How can you just say you're renting out a room, because wouldn't there be some other area of the house that even though that person is renting that room would be using? Like, would each room have its own bathroom facilities, its own,
Entrance.
its own entrance? Because then that would fall under, then there would have to be some type of common area.
Yes, the typical, say, university area, you're going to have multiple students. They rent their rooms, but they share the common area with the bathroom and the kitchen and the living room. That's all non-owner occupied, so that entire unit would be inspected. We are looking at exempting rentals that currently are owned, licensed, or certified by the state. Other uses like community-based residential facilities, hospitals, hotels, motels, we see those as being exempt as well.
Because they're being inspected by the state.
Correct.
And aren't the other housing, subsidized housing also inspected by their own entities?
I am told that happens, so we're investigating that actually right now because some of them do have to do an annual inspection as well. But I want to nail that down before I say one way or the other whether that's going to be. So that's one of the pieces that we need to follow up on before we actually adopt a program.
Referring to the Oshkosh Housing Authority, for example.
As I indicated earlier, the fee for the rental unit contact listing and registration, no fee. The inspections would occur once every 5 years. $125 is what we've projected it would cost in the city's time to do that inspection for one unit. Or, here's the economy of scale, $180 per building if all units are in the building are coordinated by the owner, regardless of the number of rental units. I'm looking at the efficiency of one trip out, one report, one trip back, going through all the units at once. I think there's a substantial time savings for doing something like that, and that's our best guess as to what we could include for that type of building. And then the reinspection fee is double the inspection fee in accordance with state code.
So if a, say a renter owner has 3 separate individual houses that he rents, he'd be charged $125 for each individual. He won't get some kind of discount.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's for 5 years.
Yes.
Yes,
So it's $25 per year.
yes. Or compared to the monthly rent, as Darren pointed out, it's $530-some. If it's, that comes out to about $2.50 per month. Our staffing plan right now would include education and training, a little clerical time and inspectors, and as we've talked about, coordinated with the fire department inspections where possible. Let's see, then I included some frequently asked questions that we've drafted the questions and the answers. The state law did change, and there is an assumption by some people that it prevented the city from running an inspection program. We've worked very hard to make sure the ordinance is drafted to meet the requirements of the state law. We'll require the contact listing registration. We do the inspections based on a regularly scheduled inspection, community-wide, and the city would charge fees for the inspections, but no more than double the fees for re-inspections. Let's see, I touched a little bit on this. Why is the city creating the residential rental registration inspection program? Based on the need to contact owners, based on the health and safety code requirements, and based on the potential impact on the neighborhoods that we're trying to improve throughout the city.
So that's so we're trying to minimize the impact that possibly, I'm looking for the right word, that if it's across the entire community, we're trying to protect the equity that everyone has in their properties, whether it be whether it's a homeowner or whether it is even a rental
Even a landlord's home.
is that
Yep.
basically what we're doing is trying to enhance the equity that these people have in those, because, as they say, rising tide raises all boats. By the same token, when that tide goes down, it takes all the boats down.
Mhm.
So if there's okay.
And
Abs-
it's also costing a lot of money in investment in some of these areas, other taxpayer dollars, because things have deteriorated to a certain level.
Right.
So for investing that, there needs to be some way of holding that once we get it up to par.
Questions about the revenues. Right now, the city is intending to fund the rental program just on the fees generated. Additional staff is required, and I'll go back to the point I made earlier. Right now, we're not getting any fees collected, even though we're probably spending a full-time equivalent going through these rental units today. So right now, city taxpayer dollars are somewhat subsidizing the inspections today. What I'm proposing with this is the fees collected will specifically go to the rental program, the contact listing, the education and training, the inspections specifically for rental housing program.
Well, so you're saying that currently city taxpayers are funding, are helping to pay for services rendered to rental property owners?
For the last few years, we've been able to track that, and yes, based on the number of cases we've had, the city doesn't recoup any of those dollars when we send an inspector out, identify the code violations. They collect a fee if they need to pull a building permit or an electrical permit, but that's something they would normally have had to do anyway. But any of the inspections and the coordination with the owner, the follow-up inspections, the city does not cover any of those costs at this point. The landlord specifically doesn't cover those costs. It's something that has been absorbed by the general budget for the building inspection division. The one thing that has changed is that the building inspection division is an enterprise fund now, so we have to account for that time much more specifically, and this is an area where the other people who are pulling permits are basically subsidizing the work of the code enforcement officers in these cases right now too. So it's kind of shifted, but it's still other people who are paying for the time for this type of activity.
And to give an extreme example, one of the rooming houses in Middle Village had such deplorable conditions that when they were reassessed, a factor in that reassessment was a $20,000 decrease in their tax assessment. So we're subsidizing blight.
Why don't we just target the university or just the bad landlords? We are following state law, and state law requires a rental inspection program to be uniform across the city. It needs to be community-wide. It can't be confined to any particular area or landlord. Again, we are following the direction of the state legislature. Here I do a little math about what it's going to cost the landlord. If the inspection's done once every 5 years and it's $125, which is the most we would charge for the inspection, that comes out to be about $25 per unit per year over that 5-year period. If you have a larger unit, say 8 units, that comes down to about $4.50 per year for the building in that 5-year cycle. Again, what if the landlord cannot afford to correct the health and safety code violations? We have the new loan programs and other loan programs available right now. My expectation is, as the program proceeds, we might even be able to come up with more funds or a different way of funding landlord-type projects, but these are the first out-of-the-gate type programs we are prepared to offer. What if the landlord does not agree with the inspector on the code violations? They can appeal that to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then if they're not satisfied with Zoning Board of Appeals, they can appeal that to Winnebago County Circuit Court. Just the way things work today. What about the Rental Housing Advisory Board? Again, this is something optional that I'd strongly recommend the council consider. They could do a lot of great things to help with this program when it comes to training and information. People can apply for that, and again, the city goes through the regular process to fill those positions. Applications to the city goes to the, I think, I forget, does that go to Diane specifically, Mr. Roloff?
Applications.
Yes, and then the mayor appoints the members subject to the confirmation of the city council.
And is it thought that that would be an equal distribution of investment owners and tenants?
I wouldn't say equal, but I think we want a fair representation of tenants, maybe neighborhood association members,
Right.
maybe people in the health or public safety field, but certainly landlords and owners would definitely make a part of that board, in my opinion. And we could even have slots specifically assigned to, say, a representative of the Winnebago Apartment Association, or a representative from a tenants association, or
Right.
a neighborhood association member. And that would have to be filled by that type of person or someone who meets that criteria.
This would not be a regulatory board. That's where the Board of Appeals comes in. Somebody wants to challenge the findings, then it would go to Board of Appeals. This is really more of a group to assist the council and staff in what kind of changes to policy and what can we better do to communicate this program to both residents as well as tenants and landlords.
One of the first things if this board does get created, a lot of people have asked about a checklist or some kind of guidance for tenants and landlords, and I think that would be a great thing for this group to work on when it comes to what kind of expectations for the inspections could they expect, so the landlords could almost do a pre-screening before we'd even arrive. If they so choose. They don't have to do it. How will landlords and tenants know this program exists? We're hoping to work with existing organizations, and we're also looking at mailings, Oshkosh media, social media, and any other ideas that advisory board could come up with, as well as other partners on this program. Certainly, the neighborhood associations have been very good at distributing information on building and property maintenance codes already. And rental program steps, certainly this is just Alan saying this is what it would take to go through the process. But if we were going to adopt an ordinance July 1st, the website we could make available July 1st based on working with the programmers. We could have the registration completed by September 1st. We could start doing the inspections as early as September 1st of 2016, and we'd start with 20%. I don't have a certain geography or pattern set up because we haven't gotten that far down the road when it comes to where we're going to go first, but we'd have to cover approximately 2,200 units every year. I think we need to have education and trading programs each year. And then, again, the ownership change and contacts throughout the year would be updated on the contact listing 24/7, 365. And the next steps, City Council direction to staff. We did draft an ordinance that we believe complies with the direction of the state legislature. We also gave you a kind of a matrix of other programs that we found in the state. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's kind of a comparison that we use to base a lot of our ideas on. And if there's anything in the ordinance or the program, the frequency, the fees, that's all still within the council's prerogative. Since we'd need to actually create an ordinance to present to you, we'd have to create a fee schedule, but we at least wanted to put this on the table so you could start talking about it and give staff a little more direction as to where you want us to go. Certainly, I'd encourage additional citizen input. We'd still need to set a public hearing date, and eventually we'd have to adopt an ordinance that includes the rental registration, inspection. You could also include the Rental Housing Advisory Board, or any other good ideas that are out there that could be incorporated into the whole program, because it's a lot of pieces into a larger program. That's how I'm thinking of because without all the pieces fitting together, you kind of lose some of that seamlessness, and you're not quite where we need to make it a good program throughout the whole community and all rental properties.
Question for you, Alan, is your council direction to staff, the ordinance revisions and program revisions, how do you want to handle that? Each of us individually send you our thoughts, do it as a...
We've done that in the past. Usually we give certain amount of time for people to give us their thoughts. We'll bring back any kind of revisions to a council meeting or another workshop. You could give us some kind of reaction at that point. We would come back with various alternatives. We'd need to have some kind of citizen input before we actually would adopt the ordinance. But at some point, we need to say, here's what we think is right, and then we get the official public hearing for the ordinance. I think that's the process we've used in the past. If anybody has any other ideas as to how we'd want to do that, I'm all ears, but that's how we've done everything else in the past. Yes.
Mr. Davis, I have a question regarding funding. I like
Yes.
the idea of having resources available to those landlords or, building owners that would like to improve their properties, but how do we protect our investment when so many of them go into foreclosure or bankruptcy?
We do typically have to take a second position. That is a risk that we are taking with our Black Grant program and the Healthy Neighborhoods program. It's only as good as the mortgage that we can file. So I expect there might be some losses, but I think the investment in the neighborhoods are going to be worth it for these rental units, because if we don't do that, then it's going to be a case where it's going to take several years to go through the foreclosure process. We got issues with abandonment in many cases. It just piles up on the neighborhood and the block. If you're asking me today, I think it's worth the investment with the risk that we would be taking with some of these landlords.
Just a follow-up on that, are you saying eventually we would end up foreclosing on them? Or the bank would probably?
The bank would.
We would not get ownership of that property eventually, would we?
Correct, no.
And we're not trying to pursue that, are we?
So we wouldn't,
Would
we be a lien holder on
Yes.
that property? And
Second position.
Yes.
what about personal?
Guarantees.
Yeah, thank you.
I haven't gotten to that kind of detail with staff, but we have used those in the past on other projects, and so I'd certainly say that's on the table as being included in the, I guess, the security position the city would have.
I mean, I'm all for helping out and assisting a property owner to make the investment in their property that needs to be done. But I am not going to subsidize someone that's going to walk away from it at some point. And the fact that it is tax dollars that we are investing in this, we just approved an investment policy tonight that basically says our policy is if we put $1 in, our policy is to get $1 out. We've seen situations where with LLCs, you can incorporate one, run that into the ground, incorporate another one, and just keep running them into the ground and walking away from your responsibilities. If I'm investing tax dollars, I want to make sure I'm getting my money back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to, is basically what I'm getting at is what this is this program is a partnership. And that's how it has to be. That's how I'm looking at this. Help me to help you. And
I would say our history with this is with the Community Development Block Grant Program. We rarely get defaults, and if we get defaults, we usually get some of the money out, most of the money actually, out of the projects. But typically, we don't get that because we do go through a screening process, and then we do look at the other liens that are on the property, and we have to look at those risks. We do weigh those risks, but even at the end, I'm going to tell you we're probably going to lose some money on some of the properties because we can't be right all the time.
Well, I would think we would do some sort of a screening program, too, that does this individual have a track record of a lot of code violations, a lot of complaints, or is it just almost an isolated incident where he does need our help to upgrade that property?
Let me just add, we do some underwriting on that. So we're looking at loan to value, we're looking at credit worthiness. So we do, we're a little bit more generous than the banks, of course, but we do underwrite, and we look at all these loans. We have a loan committee that evaluates it. We do look at, a lot of the factors that a bank would look at when they're going to do a loan.
well, I would think if they're a good if they need to come to us because they can't get the funding from a bank.
But one of those was a 50% match, right?
Yeah, there's different options, sure.
True, but still, if
To rehab, as Alan said, I think there's going to always be some risk. We want to minimize our risk. We want to make sure that Lynn and her staff doesn't end up in court all the time. But I think you're going to have some risk in any kind of program that
I fully understand risk, but I also know that if you've got a red flag waving in front of you, you don't,
right.
You don't go in there. And if you're not creditworthy enough to get from the people that are in the business of lending money.
Like I said, I like the idea of funding, and I like the idea of having something available to help. I just don't want us to be viewed as a bank. That's not our role. So that's just, it's a little bit of a hesitation and a concern that I have in regards to this.
You know, and as
And
far,
we certainly haven't fleshed out all the details of the program, because we're inventing at the same time as we're basically creating the rental program here. So it's one of those pieces that I think is critical for the success, to help the neighborhoods. And I think Darren's right with the underwriting. Our track record with the underwriting is very good, and we already know that those are projects that the homeowners and the landlords couldn't get financed all on their own. All the money we're getting from the Buckstaff project, those are projects that actually came through and we got our money back to be reinvested in the city. So I'm pretty comfortable in saying we're going to get most, if not all of our money back, but I can't guarantee it's all, because we will have some risk, as you've identified.
one additional one is, and I know that there's several times that council has been, that this has been brought forward to council, is we will allow people to finance, for lack of a better term, their special assessments at 6%. I would hope that we take a look at this program, and we're saying that we're going to go at 0%. So everyday Joe taxpayer who needs to fund their special assessment based on their conditions, we're charging 6%. I'm not saying we charge 6%, but I'm saying that there should be some, it is, and I'm not against this. I agree with Councilwoman Osby. I want to help out. I want to make this work, but again, I get back to my earlier comment. It's a partnership. And if you want to, I'm willing to work with you, but you need to be willing to work with me.
These concepts are in their infancy. Maybe what we can do is take a look and see what some other communities have done and identify some best practices that we can come back to you on. I think community development has been relying on their program that they've been funding through their community development block grant. This is different. Part of the whole idea with community development block grant is to achieve certain community development, low, moderate income goals. This is a little different, so maybe we can take a look at that and before we bring that part back, because that's going to be separate, but certainly a good part of this program. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of these. We're talking a lot about, probably will likely be a pretty narrow program.
Yes, and as one follow-up to that, since it is a city-funded program, we don't have to follow any federal requirements, which we can basically write our own ticket when it comes to what program we want. So we have a lot of flexibility here.
Yeah, a lot different than the CDBG program. So
Right.
yeah,
That has,
you can call the shots.
that's income requirements, that's,
Maybe there's even a tier level regarding the financing or something like that, if it's advantageous to the city, if somebody, purchases something that's in an area that where, maybe it is 0 or 1%, if it's another, maybe perhaps it's 2%, 3%.
Would there be any kind of like prioritization in, that correlates with our other priority areas?
Like LMI, stuff like
Yeah.
that. That would make sense.
Or where those debts are numbered areas?
Those are good.
Yes.
but I do think you go a little bit of direction, and you recommended it. I think we should have a board or a commission, and whatever you want to call that, and have, property owners on there, rental people, fire department, police department, those things, so that it's a good cross-representation, so that everybody has input.
Like all the other boards and commissions, the members have to be residents of the
Yeah, they have to
city.
live in the city of Oshkosh.
I would agree with the creation of the advisory board as well, and I think there's a great opportunity with the Oshkosh Student Association for educational outreach with students. My question is, with the state language being that it has to be administered community-wide, do we potentially run into conflict with that language by doing 20% of the inspections every year?
It needs to be community-wide. It needs to be, let me look it up real quick. Regular, just needs to be regular. They don't,
So you could say, we're going to do, say, 2016, we're going to do not the units in the north side of Oshkosh, or a zone.
yep,
And 2017, as long as we consistently have an action plan of
regular inspection.
regular inspections throughout the city.
Similar to our sidewalk replacement program. Just go around.
Good example.
Streets, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Lynn, it can't look like we're trying to target an area. We've got to be,
To be honest, no one knows yet what that language means because it's drafted, courts haven't interpreted it yet, but that's our.
So we may be required by law to do 3 or 4 on one side of the city, 3 or 4 on the other side of the city, 3 or 4 over here. We can't just pick an area of the city for 1 year and another area of the city the next year, another area, even though we keep moving around. We don't know yet, right?
You know, I think maybe, I just get to one thing, I think it'd be better if we'd all participate rather than litigate.
There you go.
any further questions of Mr. Davis? Thank Mr. Davis, Darren, your staffs. I mean, there's been a lot of work in this program. All the stakeholders, members of the Winnebago Apartment Association who helped draft what we see in front of us today. So this has not been, you and I talked about this 5 years ago.
Yes, we did.
So this has
This
been a long time coming.
You and I, no, you guys talked about it 6 years ago, because you and I have been talking about it for 5 years.
It's been on our radar a long time.
Our middle village neighborhood plan.
Right.
2013.
Something like that. You know?
I'm just going to end with one thing. I was at a conference or a forum in Milwaukee, I think it was last week, with the Urban Alliance, and there were mayors and city managers there from as far away as Ashland, West Dallas, and Oshkosh, and the different cities. The consensus was a lot of us have a growing poverty in our areas. A lot of people in poverty. Kids are getting more and more free and reduced lunch programs. These kids are living in some substandard housing. They're going to school less prepared to learn. So the League of Wisconsin Municipalities said we have to start addressing in the state growing poverty. And I think part of that is providing clean, safe housing for children.
Affordable.
Affordable. Right. Clean and safe housing for children.
That issue came up in the workshop with the school board, because they talked about how many students now are in the district that are low income kids.
It's going to continue growing.
And I will point out again, it doesn't really affect, in my opinion, the cost that will go towards the program. Not only will it will take care of the inspection at such a low cost. I don't see it affecting the affordability of those units. And if there are code violations, they need to be corrected to address the substandard housing kids or anybody else are living in. So, yes, there might be some cases where the landlords will have to bring it into code compliance, but that was the expectation. That landlord is in compliance, just like all the other landlords have to be in compliance, and there's a lot of landlords out there that are in complete compliance, but not all of them are that case.
It's a cost of doing business.
And I think that's probably that, in terms of the fairness issue, it's a matter of fairness to the landlords who are spending the money and investing the money to make sure that the housing is safe and clean. And if they're competing against somebody who's not meeting those standards, they're essentially changing the market conditions for those landlords who are following the law and being very responsible. We do have 3 weeks between council meetings with the fifth Tuesday, so we will take advantage of that to do additional outreach. I would ask council members, if you become aware of anybody that has questions or concerns, certainly bring them to our attention. I appreciate Mr. Lord being very patient and present. You get an A for civility, Mr. Lord. Thank you. And I would certainly reach out to Mr. Lord afterwards, and just so that council's aware, it's appropriate and important that we have our landlord community involved. We may not always agree, but we will certainly maintain the dialogue.
There is a lot of challenges there, particularly poverty is a huge issue. Some of these other socioeconomic factors that all enter into this, that it's a pretty big issue. And you have to, that's why I'm really in favor of this advisory board, of having stakeholders in there, because you're going to see a lot more input from all these other different agencies and things that can, give us the information to really make good decisions.
One last thing, would you let the council know how you want us to provide feedback on what we've just seen?
Yes.
Do it as a group or individually, and then give timelines, so.
Well, we got 3 weeks, so we gotta get.
And we're going to have staff meeting tomorrow morning, and
3 weeks can become, oh God, it's the 22nd day, I better do something.
that'll be the primary point of our discussion during staff meeting tomorrow.
Put a timeline.
12 hours and 15 minutes from now, Alan.
I'll let you guys go. If that's it, we don't have to vote on adjourning, we're just.
We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you.